I like to say we were doing Doge before Doge was a thing. And to build on our success, I'm launching our own state Doge.
Welcome to Cornhole Champions, a weekly podcast powered by Iowa Starting Line, where we throw bags at the state's biggest stories. I'm Zachary Oren Smith. It's Wednesday, and I don't know where you were last night, but I was on the floor of the Iowa House of Representatives for Governor Kim Reynolds' Condition of the State address. Today, Iowa Starting Line's community editor, Amie Rivers, is back to talk about what you need to take away from this first look at Reynolds' agenda. On this episode, Reynolds planned to get Iowa a Doge of its very own, hear about how the governor wants schools to ban cell phones during instructional time, a proposal to add work requirements to Medicaid, and how Reynolds wants to get serious about cancer. That's coming up on Cornhole Champions. So, Amie.
Zachary.
Have you ever watched The Condition of the State before?
Yeah, I've, worked in news for a lot of years, so.
Can I be honest with you? I've never, this is the first time I've watched from start to finish The Condition of the State.
The Condition of the State.
Condition
strong.
of the State. There's some of the reporters were talking about this in Chambers today, right? It used to be called The State of the State.
And now it's the Condition of the State.
I'm not here to tell you that State of the State isn't a objectively worse name, because it is. Condition of the State, it also sounds, I don't know, it feels like a McKinsey and Company rewrite. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. What's wrong with State of the State?
State of the State. It's got too many consonants in it.
State.
State of the State.
It just sounds hokey.
Yeah. Well, so I just got out of the chamber. The governor every year, right before the Iowa Legislature really gets to the meat of their work during the session, she tells the Iowa Legislature, she holds this kind of big joint conference. Both members of the Senate and the House show up, and she kind of gives them what is, in practice, kind of a first look at her priority. Governor Kim Reynolds characteristically has been pretty reticent, at least since I've been following her, to tell the legislature much about kind of what her priorities are going to be going into this, right? And if you're looking for like a vision for what she wants done, like what the governor, right, the person who has to sign bills in order for them to be passed into law, this is a really important night for for the state as we're trying to figure out what our legislature is going to get up to this spring.
Speaking of that, do they have like a veto proof? Like if Republicans really wanted to pass something and Reynolds wanted to veto it, do Republicans have the numbers to override her this year?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's a 2/3 majority. I would need to check my numbers on that. But yeah, Iowa Republicans, can really, while they're pretty simpatico about most actions of the state, but you find like small places where the party with the trifecta, the party that is all powerful in the state of Iowa, find some room for disagreement. I'm thinking right now of, do you remember initially when Governor Kim Reynolds was trying to pass her private school voucher bill? Do you remember this?
Yeah.
It didn't pass the first time, right?
Right. And then she primaried a bunch of them, and then it passed.
That's exactly right. Right. There were a bunch of particularly rural legislators who said, actually this bill could have some really terrible impacts for my home district, my home school district. We are going to, I can't in good conscience pass this. And then, like you say, she primaried them. There are a lot of those folks that was their last session. So there is room for disagreement. The Iowa Legislature does have the kind of margins. Republicans in both chambers have the kind of margins that they would need to override the governor. But in practice,
primary, yeah.
But like in practice, I think this is a time where I think a lot of legislators who didn't really maybe have a sense of kind of what the game plan was going to be, a lot of them were looking to this speech as kind of where they're going to start that conversation about what it is they're going to be doing in Des Moines until the cold days of April begin.
So what was your main focus for this speech going into it, and then did that change once you heard what was said?
Totally, right? The one thing that we really heard a lot about leading up to this was how Republican leaders want to reduce property taxes, right? This was in all of if you read in the Des Moines Register, in the Gazette, and the Quad City Times, kind of their coverage leading up to the Iowa legislature, they would sit down with Republicans, and all those Republicans would say, "Oh, we're cutting property taxes. Local governments are they're charging too much in property taxes. We need to continue kind of our gutting of local governments and their ability to raise funds through property taxes." What was super interesting was the governor didn't have anything to say about property taxes during this entire speech.
One little thing I noticed, I think when she was talking about how Iowa is going to be doing Doge, she said it was because we also need to be lean at the local level in order to pass meaningful property tax reform.
I like to say we were doing Doge before Doge was a thing. And to build on our success, I'm launching our own state Doge to find even greater savings and efficiencies in both state and local government.
This afternoon, a couple hours before the speech, the governor's staff had reporters in to talk through some of both her speech, her proposals that were in this kind of like large document that she's going to be distributing to legislators. And I thought it was really interesting that this kind of proposed this Doge of our own, this Iowa Doge is going to be tasked not just with kind of like the finding government waste more broadly, but particularly is going to be looking both at federal government programming and local government programming, right? So there's this like sense that we've been cutting agents. Reynolds cut 21 agencies in her kind of her reshuffle of state government, saving, I think she estimates like over $200 million in tax revenue. I don't think it's surprising that she would look at how popular the Doge Department on Government Efficiency program led by Vivek Ramaswamy and our bouncing baby boy, Elon Musk. I don't think it would be surprising, right, that she would capitalize on a program that, for at least in right-leaning circles, right, has been very popular.
Yeah, isn't Marionette Miller Meeks on that committee now? Is that
I
what
don't
I heard?
know. That's a good question. I know Joni Ernst has been, as the MAGA crowd has been trying to burn her in effigy for holding up the nomination of Pete Hegseth. I know she's been just all over Doge. I think she might sit on the committee, but I know she just is always tweeting about how great Doge is.
Get in line.
Get in line.
Yeah, they threatened a primary here too. I think that's just the new Republican way, is the threat to primarying as a means of keeping the population in check.
Did you catch one of the things I was surprised to see in this was work requirements for Medicaid.
That's why it's always been a priority of mine to make sure that our government programs reflect a culture of work. Some of these efforts have been hampered by a federal government that often pays people to stay home. But starting next week, we'll have a president who understands the importance of work. So I'm proposing that Iowa apply for a federal waiver to institute work requirements for able-bodied adults on Medicaid. In other words, if you can work, you should.
This is a source of health care for many, many, many Americans across the country. Medicaid kind of is a source for when people get sick, when people need surgeries, when people have issues that come up. This is a way of getting that help. The governor has returned to proposals in previous years to begin adding work requirements for Medicaid. So for quote unquote able-bodied Iowans, if you're going to be on Medicaid, then you gotta pitch in. And it's I think it's totally reasonable for someone to say if you're receiving a government entitlement program, right, that it makes sense, right, that there should be some sort of you should be putting into the till. But the reality is a lot of these people do work, right? A lot of these people do work very hard. The notion, I don't know, this is in my mind, part of this bucket of legislation aimed at while there's not there's not this body of evidence that there's a bunch of people taking advantage of Medicaid.
Correct.
We can raise suspicions, right? Further villainize people that
Right.
need this program, right? That they qualify because they're poor. They qualify because or that they can't work. And I don't know. It's just one of these ways of taking shots, taking pot shots at poor people for one of the few pieces of government assistance that we do provide.
I think the other piece of it is that there are legitimate problems that people who are trying to work can't do when they're on Medicaid. I mean, I did the story a while back. I think we've done a couple stories on this about the work without worry bill. Like,
Right.
there's actual problems that Iowans need help with regarding Medicaid that the state could solve, and it just won't. Like, for example, disabled folks who want to be able to work without losing their necessary health care that helps them get out of bed. For example, quadriplegics who just need some help getting out of bed, getting some tasks handled for them, and then they can work. And without that assistance, which goes away if they hold a job above a certain income, they can't work. So there are like actual things that we could do as a state
Right.
to help put people that really want to work back to work. And we just haven't been able to do that. So this is just virtue signaling. So I hope that that comes back too. And I hope that they apply that same mindset to this, because that's a legitimate population that really wants to work and contribute and can if they get that help.
Right.
And these are the kind of problems that we could actually be solving that are necessary to be solving. Not
I've
virtue
heard that
signaling.
referred to as the Medicaid cliff, right? That if you
Yeah.
if you make a certain amount, right? And you with that amount you qualify for Medicaid. But let's say you get an opportunity, a promotion or whatever, right? And that raises your income just
Yeah.
far enough to make you to disqualify you for Medicaid.
Right.
And suddenly, right, if you've got real medical bills, you're incentivized not to take the promotion, not to take the higher paying gig. You're incentivized to stay because health, as we've seen time and time again, health care in this country is unaffordable for most of us. And and so bills like Josh Turek's Work Without Worry bill were aimed at trying to do something about this cliff that exists for many people on Medicaid.
And not to beat a dead horse or anything, but
Beat the dead horse, Amie.
the problem is that we need to be bringing workers into the state. We need to be incentivizing them to want to come here. And what's going to them to come here is not us putting a whole bunch of restrictions on things. Like, maybe, for example, we could be helping people to find meaningful work here, and maybe that's what we should be focusing on.
And that's a good segue to one of the tremendous challenges facing the state of Iowa is that for many reasons, we have a doctor shortage, particularly an OBGYN shortage, but kind of a doctor shortage more broadly.
The well-being of working families in rural communities also depends on access to high-quality health care. While we have challenges, Iowa has a strong foundation to build on. But we still need more medical professionals in every part of the state. We also know that doctors often decide to practice where they do their residency. We know, too, that Iowa doesn't have nearly enough residency slots, preventing many physicians from giving our state a chance. That's why I'm directing HHS to launch a program in partnership with Broadlawns and the University of Iowa to secure over $150 million in federal funds to create a projected 115 new residency slots each year at our 14 teaching hospitals.
One of the pieces of one of the proposals that Governor Kim Reynolds spent a lot of time talking about was this partnership. They estimate that within, if you think about this, if most residencies are between 3 and 4 years, that's as many as 460 new physicians in a 3 or 4 year period. This is I think this is a great idea. What can we do to incentivize people to come create capacity here in the state? And part of that vision is the Consolidate Loan Repayment Program. The Reynolds proposal would double the investment that we currently have to $10 million, right? So for folks who are practicing medicine for 5 years in a rural area, they'll consolidate and pay down those loans, which is again, when we're talking, as we try to create resources for poor communities across our state, for rural communities across our state that need access to OBGYNs, need access to general care, primary care physicians, need access to any host of, have any host of medical needs. And right now are having to drive hours and hours to receive it. This is an attempt to take a bite out of that apple.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think in theory, that all sounds good, but you have to look at the reason why doctors are fleeing the state, especially OBGYNs, because Reynolds tied this in her State of the State speech, condition of the state speech, to the fact that we're losing physicians, we're losing people wanting to come here for residencies. And the reason is because OBGYNs do not want to work in states with abortion bans. That's affecting them because they can't do the full healthcare suite that they want to do. And they're worried that they're now under the microscope if they accidentally offer any sort of healthcare that would fall under these sort of nebulous bans.
Right.
That's one of the big issues and this is what the University of Iowa said. This is what studies have shown, doctors just want to be sure that they're going to be okay to work in this state. Like, you can throw all the money you want at them, but ultimately, they're not going to want to stay here if they're worried about getting sued. They're not going to want to stay here if they're worried about getting criminally charged. I don't blame them for that.
Totally. And just as a reminder, you can get all of this coverage of the challenge of filling the medical desert problem in the state of Iowa at iowastartingline.com. Amie, while we're on the subject, I wanted to see if we could talk a little bit about the proposal to do something about Iowa's cancer rates. Governor Kim Reynolds, in her speech, seems to be well aware of just how dire this is becoming.
Every case of cancer is a tragedy, and I'm concerned by the data showing that these tragedies disproportionately affect Iowans. Our state has ranked second for new cancer cases 2 years running, and we're one of just 2 states with rising rates. That's the what of this problem. The why and the how are where things get tricky. According to the Iowa Cancer Registry, we're in the top 5 states for binge drinking. We're also among the top for alcohol-related cancers, with the highest incidence in the Midwest. This month, the Surgeon General warned that alcohol is known as a carcinogen. Again, none of this is conclusive. There's a lot we still don't know, and multiple factors are likely at play. We shouldn't jump to conclusions, but we need to get to the bottom of this.
By virtue of you living in Iowa, you have a greater risk of being diagnosed with cancer. That's a pretty chilling reality that so many of us are dealing with, not the least of which is the Reynolds family. The first man of that couple, is that what we call the
first
husband?
Gentleman?
First gentleman, thank you. Sorry.
Yes.
Iowa, the first man ever, the first gentleman was diagnosed with cancer, as was the Senate Majority Leader, Jack Whitaker. This is hitting close to home, right? And so I'm not surprised to find that this would be in Reynolds' proposal, that she wants to form a $1 million partnership between Iowa Health and Human Services, a state agency, and the University of Iowa to research the behavioral, genetic, and environmental behaviors that contribute to this issue. And I think she, in her speech, touched quite a bit on the relationship between booze consumption and cancer rates, right? One thing that I noticed wasn't mentioned was water, right? We have been reporting quite a bit over the years about the way Iowa has chosen to ignore water quality issues, and it's related to its ag economy, right? The over utilization of nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizer, the way that we, the number of impaired waterways we have across the state. When we talk about environmental features, water quality, air quality, the ways that we are opening ourselves up to these pollutants, right? Matter. And so I'm this is a attaboy, or this research partnership. Keep in mind, right? Choosing to study the issue is not choosing to do anything about the issue, right? So
that's true. Yeah.
And so I look forward to the state taking seriously this issue. I just hope that we also do something about it when the time comes.
Yeah, I'm encouraged that even though she really did mention, Iowa being a binge drinking state, and certainly the Surgeon General talking about alcohol being carcinogen, that's a known thing. I mean, and there are cancers that are caused by alcohol consumption, but a lot of cancers don't have anything to do with alcohol consumption. My mom died of lung cancer, and
Sure.
she didn't really drink at all. I mean, so there's clearly other things going on here. And I think you're right to touch on water quality. I think nitrates need to be looked at. I'm glad that environmental causes are included in this proposal. I hope that that stays when the legislature takes it up, because it could be very easy for them to, hear from the Farm Bureau and be like, you know what, don't look at this. Don't look at any of this. Just look at these things. And then a report is based on that, and it's incomplete. So
Right.
I really hope that this is a good faith effort to take a really holistic look at anything that could be causing this, because it is a big issue and it's affecting everybody across the political spectrum.
I want to move now to childcare. One of the it's estimated that 1 in 3 Iowans do not have access to childcare slots in their community. Maybe a theme that we can kind of pull out here, right, is that we need to, as a state, to be doing things that makes life here good, right? And part
Yeah.
of that is for families who for people who choose to work that are taking care of kids, right? Finding adequate childcare slots, finding a childcare slot, and then also being able to afford a childcare slot becomes really important. And the Reynolds administration has been doing work on this issue. There have been pilot programs that make childcare free for childcare workers, right, as a means to kind of incentivize childcare workers. There's also been some pilots to incentivize the payment for those childcare workers, right, to increase the amount that they're paid. Both of which are great ideas, and both of which it sounds like Governor Kim Reynolds wants to build on.
Now that we know it works, let's make this program permanent. A new pilot program called Community Solutions Funds is also making progress. Working with the Iowa Women's Foundation, the state contributed $3 million to facilitate the creation of 9 regional community solutions funds to raise childcare wages without raising cost on families. These funds accept donations from businesses, philanthropists, and nonprofits, recruiting more Iowans to this profession.
She said in her speech, a lot of that, a lot of these operators are saying that, they want to know that funding is going to be there long term if they're going to depend on
Right.
it. So it sounds like that's heading. At least the governor is pushing for that. It's estimated that in the last 4 years, the state has increased the number of childcare slots by almost 27,000, which is really impressive, right, in terms of increasing that capacity. But it's important to remember that an increase may not be sufficient for the issue, right? And we have to be building building these numbers to accommodate the incredible demand that we're experiencing in this state.
Because the pilot program, at least the part that helps to pay childcare workers basically a living wage or up their salary at least, relies so heavily on local businesses basically helping to subsidize this.
That's right.
And that's the part that I worry they'll be able to scale. Because how do you scale that, for example, in a rural area where there's not a ton of businesses, for example? And then how do you just scale that in general and then keep that? Right. You were talking about the problem of whether it's temporary, whether it's going to be there for the long term. If you're relying on basically the voluntary generosity of your local large businesses and then those go away, what do? You're back to square one. So I think it definitely has to have maybe more of like a steady funding stream from a different place as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the way Reynolds is kind of targeting exactly that issue, right, is that currently we've got these kind of regional funds that help with these programs. She would create a much larger state fund, right, that's able to kind of grapple with some of these kind of regional issues.
Okay.
Um,
That's good. I didn't hear her mention those specifics. So yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah, totally. I mean, but it's a sprawling speech, right? And it's just a proposal, right? So I think it is important to
Yeah.
keep in mind that we've got to get these issues through chambers and then to a pen, a process that someone would learn in a civics class. And it just so happens that civics is something that Governor Kim Reynolds wants Iowa educators to be thinking more about. She
Segue.
is segue. She's telling one of her proposals would require that in order for a student to graduate, an Iowa student to graduate high school, they would need to pass the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Assessment before graduating. This is the same test that we use for migrants to the United States that they're required to pass in order to kind of on their road to citizenship, right? It's 60% pass. I think you have to get 60% in order to pass the test. But
That's
this would
it.
well,
Oh, man.
it's like it's proven pretty tough. Let me look up some sample questions for.
I feel like I tried to take one when I was being passed around before, and you got to know a lot of sort of esoteric facts that you learned in school that I don't really remember anymore.
I'm just gonna pick a random one. Who wrote the Declaration of Independence? Amy, if you're so smart.
Was it Thomas Jefferson?
It was Thomas Jefferson. Nice job. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Damn it. I probably wouldn't have gotten that one wrong. or probably would have gotten that one wrong.
Give me another one.
Who is the father of our country?
George Washington?
Of course, it's George Washington. George E.W.
I get to stay now.
Um,
Wait, I got you one more.
Let me find I want to find like a stump you one.
Yeah, stump me.
Who is the Chief Justice of the United States right now?
John, damn it. Roberts?
You're right. It's John Roberts.
Yeah.
Nice job. Nice job, dude. Okay. So like, I'm not really proving much. I'm kind of just like, I
That
guess.
was a hard one though. And I have obviously a bigger media literacy probably than most folks, right? Like I'm on Twitter all day like a psycho, right? So for sure.
The thing that I find kind of challenging with this, and I to be clear, right, I actually do think it's really good for people to understand the workings of government. I know that that's a big mission for Iowa Starting Line, is that for folks that listen to this podcast, subscribe to our newsletters, that are on social media, that that they understand the world around them, right? We want you to understand how you can be part of the process of governance, right? But to take this test, right, that's going to be instructional time, not just to learn the material, but to take the actual test. And I'm, of course, right, like I hear from teachers all the time about the challenge of there just not being enough instructional time in the classroom. They're already pulled in a million directions. They already have a ton of assessments that they're responsible for. While again, I don't have any kind of first principle issue with the citizenship test. I do worry about the kind of already large load of regulations that we put on classrooms, on teachers, and we ask them, just deal with it, right? Figure it out. You'll find space for it. I mean, I do wonder kind of what the extent to which this is just another thing to worry about.
That, and she announced during the speech that she's adding more math, sort of individual personalized learning things to schools' plates, to teachers' plates as well. And of course, these are just like continuing to mandate things of public schools while starving them of money. And we're just seeing that pattern continue, basically. Like, are you actually giving more resources to schools to help with this? Like she claims that she's, providing, instructional material and she's providing training, but are you providing enough money for these teachers? Are you providing, enough resources for these schools to be able to do all the other things that go with this? So I think we need to just think, again, more holistically about our public schools. And again, private schools don't have to do this, right? They're getting the taxpayer money, not having to worry about the mandates. So,
and I think this is a really interesting point, because I can tell that one of the things that Governor Kim Reynolds and her staff are really a narrative that they're really trying to go after is that Reynolds isn't funding public education, right? She, during the presentation I saw, I had someone tell me, last year, $3.8 billion went into public schools, a massive 43% of the state's budget. This was a increase from the previous year that we've been seeing, kind of stepped increases. And this is for public schools. This isn't just for if you add in money that goes to private school vouchers, right, there is real step-by-step increases in funding for public education. But the thing that this like kind of this number without the context that these numbers lack is the way that prices have risen, the way that they've not kept pace with the realities of running a school district in the state of Iowa, right? You have school districts that are closing buildings. You have school districts that are struggling to recruit teachers or struggling to keep teachers, right? Because they see the opportunities elsewhere. And, I want to have good schools in our state. I want to have strong public schools in my neighborhood, right, that I could send a kid to. And when over time, and this is a long-term process, right, over time, as we do not fund schools adequately, when we do not raise the per pupil funding for these districts, this is what we get, right? We school boards are left to make really hard decisions for how they keep keep the lights on and students educated. Speaking of this, one of the ways that Reynolds says that we need to help teachers is she wants all the school districts in the state to pass a cell phone ban of some sort.
80% of Gen Z report using their phone at least 6 hours per day. It's unhealthy, and the results are as predictable as they are unacceptable. Lost sleep, lower productivity, more distractions, and increased anxiety. What's no longer acceptable is doing nothing. That's why I'm proposing legislation that requires schools keep instructional time free from digital distractions at a minimum. Of course, there'll be common sense exceptions like during an emergency, but the evidence is in, and it's time to act.
The way it was explained to me, right, there's a floor and then there's a ceiling, okay? So the floor, this is like Reynolds' thing, right? So at a minimum, during instructional time, she wants for schools to make electronic devices like cell phones, laptops, etc., to prohibit them from the classroom during instructional time. That's what they call the quote the floor, right? And there are districts that have implemented this, right? This is something that we are seeing some success on. But her preferred option, right, which would be a little more intense in order to make happen, is a kind of school bell prohibition, right? Saying that when a student shows up to school, they aren't allowed to operate their phone, right? They have to keep that. Whether that's I've seen protective sleeves. I've seen them. They have to keep it in their pocket. In fact, that was kind of what it was like when I was a kid.
I love how you're so much younger than me.
Yeah, I'm 30. You're 40. How are you, Amie?
That's right. I'm 40. Yeah, we didn't
Cool.
have cell phones really. No, in school.
Yeah,
so
y'all
we
had,
didn't have to worry about this.
Y'all had like smoke signals that you had to use to call
Yes.
the clan together.
That's right. But the world is different now. I mean, we know this. School shootings are a reality that these kids live with. They feel more comfortable being able to reach their parent. And honestly, I think the parent feels more comfortable being able to reach them. Now, is there a middle ground you can find? I think absolutely. I think the protective sleeves things is a really good idea. Then they stay in the classroom. The kids have access to them during non-instructional time. I think that's fine. Like if we're teaching them basically to be functional adults in the workplace, get to have cell phones on them, right? And they can, use them as needed while they're doing their work. So I think that that's a good middle ground. But what do I know? We use stone tablets.
Well, and I think that gets to like the root of the issue, right? Is that school districts in the Quad Cities, in Des Moines, in Iowa City, in Cedar Rapids, right, are all kind of working on. They're all thinking about what their policy should be. It's not like they're ignoring this issue. They're trying to do something about it.
You're talking about local control. You're talking about home rule.
He's talking about local control. He's talking about home rule.
Those things are not around anymore. No. When have
they're not.
Republicans cared about that in the last few years?
Do you want to say what local control is? Like what like that concept? It comes up in Iowa politics quite a bit.
It's just the idea is that you're a governing body, for example, in your school district, or you're a governing body in your city. and as such, you should deal with local issues within your jurisdiction. When you go to the state level and say this is how you should deal with local issues, that's sort of been a change, and I don't necessarily know if that's a permanent change that Republicans are doing, or if they're just saying we don't like the way that you're doing things here, Davenport.
Right.
We
Cough,
don't like the
cough,
way you're
Davenport.
doing things here, Des Moines, right? So we're going to mandate what you do.
The Quad City Times, for folks interested in reading more about this, the Quad City Times had a really excellent piece. I think it was in last year. I think they published it last year. It's a series looking at the ways that, just like the science around the impact that being distracted in school, like the way that impacts a child's ability to learn. But they also look at kind of the policy question, like kind of what are, if we survey what people are doing in these spaces, what kinds of programs are they supporting? What kinds of programs are they enacting in schools? What do you make about her comments about was it taxation in Illinois?
Their taxes are higher, their energy costs are higher. She says their labor participation rate is lower. So she's going to sell businesses on why they should move their operations across the Mississippi River. So I looked at the labor participation rate, and it's like a difference of 1%. So our labor participation rate, for example, is 66.3%, and Illinois is 65.2%. And this was as of November, the latest that the numbers were out. So we're talking negligible labor participation rate. And in any case, I think our bigger problem is workforce. We have a very low unemployment rate that's been low for a long time.
Right.
Employers are desperate to hire. If anything, she should be going to Illinois and just grabbing people off the street and bringing them to Iowa, not businesses, because
Easy.
now those businesses are going to compete for the same small pool of workers.
Don't give her ideas. Easy, Amy.
Just grab people.
And that was another episode of Cornhole Champions. If you like the show, please rate it and subscribe, share it with your friends. And while you're at it, sign up for my newsletter at cornholechampions.substack.com and get these episodes straight to your inbox when they drop Wednesday mornings. Cornhole Champions is a weekly podcast powered by Iowa Starting Line. The podcast is produced by me with music from Avery Mossman. Cornhole Champions is a proud member of the Iowa Writers Collaborative. We'll see you for a new episode next Wednesday. Until then, I'm Zachary Oren Smith.
I'm Amie Rivers.
Thanks for listening. Can I be honest with you, Amie? I've had coming to Des Moines. I was kind of like worried about what is it that I'm going to eat. I have my spices, I have my pots and my pans, my Tupperware for to put things in, right?
Yeah.
And so I have settled on this age-old technology that I haven't used since I was a single man. It's called the pot o' beans. Have you ever made a pot o' beans?
Absolutely. Have made a pot of beans. Yeah.
This is powerful. This might be the most powerful technology post-wheel. This might be more powerful, actually, than the wheel in terms of like its ability to forge empire. What do you know about empire?
Well, I live in the United States of America, so maybe a good amount.